Hey folks, back to normal, at least for today's video in terms of just kind of a short chat, but the message today's got to do with the fact that working within a structure, with other people, within a team, is entirely normal. It's not cheapening it anyway, it's not lesser than doing it solo. This is one of the things we battle against when people are getting started, where they want to feel like they're doing it all themselves. And there's incredibly few games you can find that you really enjoyed, that inspired you, that changed your life, that you know of, that were really truly built by one person. There are a handful of exceptions, but for the most part, those are such isolated examples that we come up with that we always go back to the same examples, which is usually a sign that something is actually not a rule, it's an exception to a rule. It's so common. I mentioned this point in GameDev Biz the other day. It's so common that a team of people who are not individually famous achieve building a game which is of notoriety that it's not even news. That it doesn't get coverage, the people behind it, because it's just so normal that when you have multiple people involved, their skills can support each other in ways that vastly accelerate what people achieve, what people can do, and what they're able to accomplish. One of my very first interviews with a game developer, this is back in 2009, actually late October 2009, so literally almost exactly 8 years ago or so, was with Warren Robnett, the creator of Atari Adventure. Now I realize that's behind the age group of some people who are watching these videos. Atari Adventure was essentially the precursor to Zelda, and I mean that. It's one of the first few graphical games, and certainly the first game of any notoriety or reach, that had an overhead graphical view of your map, and your character, which to be fair was a yellow square, would walk from one room to the next by walking to the edge of the screen, much like Zelda went further with on the Nintendo Entertainment System. This was Warren Robnett pulling it off on the Atari hardware, which was essentially thought at the time to be incapable of doing that. But Warren Robnett, in our interview, he'd mentioned that he had a mega hit when he was quite young, that was Adventure, went on to help start another company that made Rocky's Boots, which is actually a famous early landmark in educational games. And after that, he had never done actually commercial games to follow, or kind of he hadn't made another kind of game since. And that's something he didn't expect to happen, but as he kind of explained, it actually arose from the fact that he was taking for granted, until he didn't have it, the power and benefits of having all that kind of support structure, having those people around you, of kind of, whenever we're building games with a big team or people in a big company, sometimes they'll think, oh, if only we didn't have all these other people in our way. If only it was just me. If only I could just do my vision, my thing. And what ends up happening is we start to take much longer than we think it should take. We start to lack that feedback. Even sometimes, us explaining what we're thinking to somebody else helps us get more things out of ourselves than if we didn't have that person as a soundboard who kind of at least understands where we're coming from, at least knows the context we're talking about, where we can kind of walk through and talk through what we're doing. Helps us achieve better things. So it's one of the things we try to make more accessible through Gamkedo Club, or there's obviously other communities you could find where you try to do these things. We have our reasons and I think it's working for some folks, but it's something that is, wherever you're at, if you're trying to make games, you're going to have a lot more success with it, almost without exception, if you find other people to work within and some sort of process and structure. And again, I know we can be inclined to want to buck structure, to want to kick it off and, run free, and the reality is those games don't tend to get finished as easily, as well, or as high a quality, or as consistently on time as when there's a bit of structure. Same sort of thing that actually benefits the jam community as well, where they start with a clear deadline in mind, and part of why so many longer term projects don't is because, unlike Gamkedo Club games, they're not actually starting and sticking to and serious about an end deadline and working backwards from that in terms of what they can schedule and what they can accomplish, adapting to that as they go. But anyway, more obviously, infinite more I could say about that, and I probably will in the days ahead. That's really the thought for the day, just that having structure around you, having some process, having peers, being on a team, isn't something that's a weakness. It's not something that's showing that you're incapable of doing things. It's really showing that that's how things get done. It's enabling you to do your best work. It's allowing you to really hone in on doing a piece of a game incredibly well in a way that otherwise our attention just gets so spread, so scattered. We're just not really built for it as people. It's just not kind of where the great products and great things that we enjoy tend to come from. So that's it for the day. Thank you as always for following along. I realized that maybe it was a bit of a different pace for a while with those game developer interviews from the podcast. That said, if you enjoyed those, check out, just like I had up on the text every day there, gamkedo.community is where you can find more of those podcasts coming out at this point every 2 weeks. A lot of them are club guest speakers we like to share the audio from. But yeah, so check those out, and thanks again for following along. Bye for now. See you all tomorrow.